So my daughter's 5, and I was really paranoid about her, like, microbiome, just everything, allergies, like everything to do with her, because I was sick from such a young age, and then I was on antibiotics so often. I was like, my microbiome's probably messed up, which means she's going to be messed up, and like, what can I do about that? And so I didn't start, I did meat only when we were first introducing foods, and then introduced like one food at a time and waited. And that worked really well. And she does have, like, she has environmental allergies, and she's got a host of sensitivities. But we were able to, like, avoid them because we just did one food at a time.
Now, do you know if it's, like, obviously, I'm sure you've researched this heavily, but how much of it is genetic versus epigenetic? Like, I know, and maybe, I don't know if this is even a question you can answer, but I know, for example, if somebody is obese, like self-inflictedly obese when they are pregnant and have a kid, you know, they could pass on some of that to their child and put them in a worse kind of baseline position. And then they have to deal with those issues too. Does that have any sort of crossover from, like, I think you mentioned both of your parents had autoimmune issues to some extent?
Yeah, my mom actually recently got diagnosed with lupus, which she's not on medication for it. She's on the same diet as me.
Okay.
But that explains like arthritis and some organ issues and like some eye issues. So lupus. And my dad had psoriasis and alopecia at one point, gum disease, like just not great from both. I have a brother, he's totally fine. I have no idea how that happened.
Estrogen is very impactful on autoimmune issues. So typically you'll find that, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune issue that attacks the thyroid. And in general, it's very, very majorly affecting women relative to men. And it's because of estrogen's impact on the immune system, seemingly. So women
I wonder... That's really interesting. Okay, I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, though. A lot of the people I've spoken with who've had autoimmunity and are on like the lion diet or the carnivore diet have gotten significantly worse or got worse, whatever their problem was, after having children. And for me, I actually put myself into remission on a very restrictive paleo diet. So it was super clean. I was eating like 25 foods, which I thought was restrictive. But I didn't have any symptoms. And then I had scarlet, and that's when I went over to the meat-only diet because my autoimmune flared up. Do you know anything about pregnancy exacerbating autoimmunity?
I would imagine the massive fluctuation in hormones from a progesterone, estrogen aspect throughout that process would have very significant implications on that. How they would go to, like, as far as the metrics of hormones before pregnancy, during, and then after, and reaching baseline, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly what in general they do, but I would imagine, and this is kind of where the utility of having baseline blood work comes in, and why I recommend anybody get like an extensive panel, regardless if they're going to go on TRT or not, like anything. Because if something goes awry, being able to look back and see what was my baseline when I was healthy and what is weird and aberrant now can be very, very helpful for actually like owning in and figuring out what might be screwing you up. So from like a hormone metabolism aspect and just balance of everything, like I would imagine there could be something there for sure. Like I know postpartum depression is, I believe, lack of progestogenic activity from the changes in progesterone activity in the body. So having that crash or be non-existent or, you know, decrease, whatever it may be, could be something that leads to like anxiety, depression, mood swings, just like a lot of major issues. And they've actually developed drugs around trying to like replicate the same things that you get from like adequate amounts of natural hormone production from progesterone, for example. So yeah, there's definitely, I would imagine, something very impacted by the hormone balance side of things after, for sure. And that's where, you know, a good elaborate blood test, I think, would be highly warranted compared to a baseline beforehand.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Regarding progesterone, from what you know about the topic, is that not enough progesterone to begin with, or are those like downstream problems, like it's not getting converted properly or something?
I believe it's not enough in general. Typically, people who have conversion issues are people who are using drugs that impact enzymatic pathways. Like, for example, guys who use finasteride for preventing hair loss, there's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. And if you inhibit that enzyme, despite the fact that you're preventing the hormone DHT from wreaking havoc on your head, you're also preventing the conversion of different progestogenic metabolites, like allopregnanolone is a very, very honed in on one that has like anxiolytic activity and is very, very significantly implicated in like depression outcomes and whatnot. And if you don't have either a sufficient amount of the substrate to produce those metabolites, so progesterone being the main thing off the top of my head that I could think of that's impactful on that, or if you're using a drug as a male to inhibit that enzyme, then downstream, yeah, it could be problematic. But from the female side of things, I would imagine progesterone, lack thereof, is probably the main needle mover in that side.
Interesting. I had a pretty miserable pregnancy experience, and I know like there's some women who get pregnant and then they're like, they still have pregnancy hormones, but they're kind of like calm and happy and like just like pregnant. And I just went like batshit crazy. And I could feel hormones, and I was like, that doesn't feel like me. And it was bad, and it felt like something was wrong. And I had this, and I know some people have miserable pregnancies, but it felt like I went crazy in a way that something was like off.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if I spent the years like age 12 to 23 on antidepressants, which can really increase your progesterone levels. And I was wondering if being on that for like a decade during my developmental years screwed up my brain enough that just some of the pregnancy hormones just don't make me feel good. I can hardly take any medication now without it making me feel like terrible in a side effect way that normal people shouldn't really have. Like antihistamines, anything, kind of make me crazy.
Yeah, the SSRI side of things, like as far as female endocrinology, it's definitely not my like wheelhouse. And again, I'm not like a clinical specialist or anything. I'm just a guy on YouTube ultimately at the end of the day. So don't take this as medical advice, anybody watching. This is why you would get a high quality medical provider. But from what I have seen, I think SSRIs, like even from a quick Google search, they seem to impact allopregnanolone solely and do not substantially affect the brain concentrations of progesterone or dihydroprogesterone. So, it's tough to say too, because some people, the way they partition certain hormones, like down certain pathways to different metabolites, it's different proportionally, and different tissues have different receptor expression from that amount of hormone. Like even from the testosterone side of things, some people are going to get more of an effect, even though they have less testosterone on a blood test than another guy, because of the way the receptors interact with the hormone. So it's tough to say. You can't really predict broad spectrum just because you have a heightened level on a blood test or a heightened level based on what it's supposed to do, that's going to yield the exact effect you're looking for, especially when it might have like backhanded consequences on upstream things that are going on. So, like extra, selective serotonin reuptake inhibition, I can't say for certain what it did that, might have impacted you.
Nobody knows either.
Yeah.
Like nobody knows. I talked to some Eastern European doctors, and they said they have brain scans that say that they change, that you could see it on brain scans, like decades of SSRI use. And I was like, wow, that's definitely not something that we have here. At least they don't say that.
Yeah, I think there was some study that came out recently that said SSRIs are like, I don't know, they used to be thought to be, lack of serotonin was thought to be the cause of depression. And then recently they were like, no, that's actually not the case.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, there's no evidence that serotonin plays, that type of role, or lack of serotonin plays a role in depression. It's like, oh, all these people on serotonin increasing drugs.
But sometimes it's hard to tell too when it's like, because again, when you circle back to the low hanging fruit discussion, it's like, how many people on this earth are getting 6 hours of sleep perpetually, have to get up underslept, drive to a job they hate? And there's so many like different factors from a lifestyle perspective that are so deleterious to all of the hormone systems. And then they'll blame, they'll rely on a drug or this or that. And then they're wondering why the they're feeling a certain way, it's got to be because of the drug or not because of the drug, when in reality it's like the baseline infrastructure that holds up like the tower, so to speak, is just not even set properly to begin with. So it's kind of hard to say for certain, like owning in on one specific thing. Oh, it was definitely this, when we have no idea about all the other. Like, weren't you on Adderall at the time too when you were trying?
Yeah. I was on tons of things.
So like, I imagine that fucked your sleep up brutally at the same time. So we have no idea for sure, but I would imagine that has like, it's like a vicious circle effect. Like sometimes you'll take a drug to correct an issue that was caused by some lack of foundational principles from a lifestyle perspective. And then using that might fix something acutely, but on the back end fucks up the baseline stuff. And then it's like, yeah.